Thank you so very much, Brother Pointer the second. Give honor to Brother Pointer the first for your gracious and generous introduction and for the opportunity to come to this wonderful consortium of schools to be able to talk to you this evening about Martin Luther King Jr. and the extraordinary ideas that he had and the inspiration that he offered this nation in order for us to move forward. The life he lived, the extraordinary capacity to imagine a different future that he inspired us with is something that we continue to hold dear. And so to ECU, to App State, to UNC Dub, and to Western Carolina, it is a tremendous honor to be able to talk to you tonight about some very serious issues in regard to Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy and the degree to which that legacy has been contested and fought over by people who don't often, or at least don't always, seek to use that legacy in uplifting and, I think, in ennobling fashion. So to have this opportunity to chat with you all, I'm going to throw out some ideas first, and then, of course, we'll have a Q&A and then open it up, I think, even further to people to be able to have their questions answered or their comments heard is something I certainly look forward to. When we think about the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., we often think about it in regard to the most famous speech he gave, I Have a Dream. And the basic outline of Dr. King's relevance to our times is often dictated by the outlines of that speech. But what I want to do tonight is to not only honor that speech, which we should, one of the greatest speeches ever given, that he ever gave, and that was ever given in American society. But I want to also suggest that we move beyond that one speech into a broader interpretation of the ideas that Dr. King had that loomed larger over the horizon of American political and social and economic life than merely the reflex response to Dr. King's most notable oration. And so the title I would like to use to address you, because the great Southern historian C. Van Woodward said that a title is a contract between an author and his or her audience, and in this case, between a speaker and his audience. I would like to choose the title, Martin Luther King Jr. and the United States of Amnesia. Martin Luther King Jr. and the United States of Amnesia. And I think let me first of all say that that title is not mine, but is a title taken from the great Gore Vidal. And Gore Vidal is a writer who said that we live in the United States of amnesia. I would add that not only do we live in the United States of amnesia, but that the theme song is provided by Barbra Streisand. Now, I know some of y'all don't even know who Barbra Streisand is. I was having fun in the meet and greet earlier. with the young people because one of them didn't know who Luther Vandross was. Please tell me that most of you on here know Luther Vandross and have listened to his music. Shout out to Sister Hassani. I'm not dogging you. You're a great woman. I'm sure a lot of young people don't know who Luther Vandross is. And if you don't know Luther, you probably really don't know Barbra Streisand. Barbra Streisand, of course, was a great singer, is a great singer, still alive, a remarkable woman, and a singer who has sung many standards that have been deeply ensconced in the collective consciousness of American society. But in singing that song, she sang memories, memories like the corners of my mind. It contained a lyric by, I think, Marilyn and Alan Bergman. I think they are the co-authors of that song. You know, you young people have Google at your access. You can check it out. Let me know if I'm tripping or not. But the song's lyrics go in part, what's too painful to remember, we simply choose to forget, right? Not only did Barbra Streisand sing that, many others have as well, especially in a noteworthy fashion, the great Gladys Knight. Please tell me y'all know Gladys Knight and the Pips. Gladys Knight and the Pips. Woo, woo. Midnight train to Georgia. Come on now. It wasn't Carolina, it was Georgia, but don't be hating. And so what's too painful to remember, we simply choose to forget. So that amnesia is a choice, as a reflex against the accumulation of knowledge, the extraordinary possibility that the knowledge we possess and the knowledge that we have must be regulated, you know, seen through, filtered through the prism of a nostalgia or a filter that denies the legitimate opportunity to engage in serious reflection on our history, because it's too painful for us to recall. And because it's too painful for us to deal with, we seek to avoid it. We seek to deny it. We seek to delegitimate it. We seek to invalidate it. We seek sometimes to avoid it altogether. What's too painful to remember? And what is too painful to remember in American history for us, especially in regard to Martin Luther King Jr. and more broadly, Black people? We are in a bitter battle over the interpretation of American democracy and American society and American ideas and American identity right now. We are in a bitter battle to determine the future of this nation, what ideas will prevail, what ideals will govern us, what motivations and aspirations will characterize us, and how we will grasp hold of those noble beliefs that form the foundation of this nation in order to stand tall upon them, to tiptoe and look over the fence of the future, to anticipate what is to come. But so often we are bitterly divided because we seek to avoid the knowledge that can be gleaned from looking at the bitter history of race in America. A history that suggests that you and I have been ensconced, deeply imbricated in and implicated in a history where things happened that weren't so good, that enslavement was so fundamental to American identity. Now people are trying to play it off. The 1776 Commission saying it wasn't that bad and that Black people were saved from being in, Africa, extricated from their resting in the African soil and brought here to America, right? The ridiculous characterization of enslavement is indicative of what is too painful to remember. We either simply choose to forget or we distort the memory of it. What's painful? To remember that 1619, we extricated 20 or some odd souls from their resting in African soil and brought them here to American society. And that against their will, forcible immigrants to be certain, against their will, up here in Jamestown, where began formally in terms of recognition, or at least even symbolically in 1619, right? When we look at the totemic force of 1619, by which I mean the representative and symbolic force that is connected to that number, 1619, that suggests the beginning of the perilous preoccupation with pigment as the predicate for the plantation and for the enslavement of Black people and Black bodies on that plantation or in the city, right? Because Black people were on more than plantations in the South when it came to enslavement in America. There were some urban arrangements where enslaved people operated as well. But the plantation is an avatar, is a symbol of the ways in which Black bodies were mercilessly mutilated, and certainly dominated in a society that refused to acknowledge our fundamental humanity and our fundamental intelligence, denied us the legitimate access to literacy so that we could be able to read and write, and then blamed us, quote, for being ignorant and dumb. Restricted legally the capacity of Black people to learn and appropriate knowledge, to read from books, whether the Bible or the school primer, and then castigated us, cast aspersions against us for lacking the requisite rationality to be able to engage in critical thinking about the world. Think about it. Thomas Jefferson, in his notes on Virginia, said that the Negro lacked sophisticated rationality. Well, you know, denying the rationality of Black folk and the ability to engage in sophisticated reasoning without acknowledging the concomitant, simultaneous attempt to control Black life, to dominate Black life, to refuse to allow the privilege of learning within Black life, of reading within Black life, of writing within Black life, because you wanted to control the comprehension of Black people, because once they gained that knowledge, they would understand that they were being fundamentally unfairly treated, unjustly denied opportunity. Now, they knew that without reading or writing. They knew that the inability to read and write was about mastering the texts that the master would put forth, that the dominant culture would put forth, that it would contain plans, blueprints, ambitions, motivations, inspirations to further conquer Black life. And if Black people had access to that, if they knew what was going on, if they could tell what was going down, then they could somehow get together and stop it, or at least plan up on a way, scheme up on a way to interrupt the operation of white hegemony, of white dominance in the culture. And so that bitter history is often a problem to many brothers and sisters today. When we fast forward from enslavement in 1619 to the bitter battle for the founding of this nation in 1776, when it formally came into being, and when the Civil War comes about in the 1860s. And so, in the mid 1860s. And so many people are still relitigating, refighting, re-engaging that war. That Civil War, that bitter schism between brothers and fathers and sons, and between kinfolk, as they fought over the future of this nation, trying to determine the status of Black people as enslaved people in this country. Now, some continue to say, well, no, the Civil War was really about a battle over states' rights. The state's right to do what? To own enslaved people. It wasn't about the enslaved. It wasn't about the right of Southern states to own peanut butter or to reap the benefits of cotton or rice, although indirectly that was what was at stake. It was about who was going to plant, who was going to plow, who was going to be enslaved to do the labor. Even as they were being demonized and constructed as a lazy people, they're doing most of the physical labor and a great deal of the intellectual labor upon which rests American society. And so there's a bitter battle over that. And so people have amnesia because they don't want to realize that. You all are mostly from the South, or at least now in the South as you attend school in Carolina, in God's country. And yet, at the same time, recognizing that in the South, there has been deep and profound argument over the future of America, over the Confederacy, over flags that fly, over banners of bigotry that are claimed to be those of heritage, as if heritage and hate cannot coexist. And so, the truth of the matter is that there is a bitter battle over the future of this nation premised upon a reading of and an appropriation of that past that is too bitterly divisive for many of us to acknowledge. And therefore, we try to smooth it out. We try to subsume it under the rubric of amnesia or nostalgia, and we don't confront the bitter, acrimonious history that was constituted in our collective pasts. And so, my brothers and sisters, when we think about Martin Luther King Jr., we cannot extricate Dr. King from the broader parameters of the struggles we wage as we try to argue against bitterly divisive histories that remind us that the reason we want to forget is that because we have created such horror for certain groups of people, like Africans in America, and that we have refused to own up to our complicity in the injustice that prevailed, or because we are unwilling to do the work now that would result in a deep and profound engagement with the past to understand where we've come from in order to move forward to where we think we need to go. Martin Luther King Jr. was a son of the South, born in 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. Would have been 92 years old on his birthday on January 15th. And yet, Dr. King didn't live to be 40. A man of enormous intelligence, of high intellectual capacity, a man who was deeply and profoundly motivated to do the right thing in life, a moral sensibility second to none. Went to college early on an early admissions program because the World War II had depleted Black communities, especially of growing, of young men, and therefore people like Dr. King were let into Morehouse or admitted into Morehouse early because they were highly intelligent, but also seeking to fill the gaps created by the war. Went to college at 15, graduated in the late 40s at 19 years old, right? Around 1948, somewhere around there. Then went to seminary, Crozer Theological Seminary in Pennsylvania. And then went up to Boston to get his PhD in systematic or philosophical theology, really, studying and contrasting the visions of God by two famous theologians, one named Paul Tillich, who believed that God was the ground of one's being, not a personal, entity, not a personality, not a personality that weaved its way through the history of the globe. And then on the other hand, Henry Nelson Wyman, a philosopher who was a personalist, a theologian who believed that God was akin to had possessed personality, and there was a person at the heart of the universe, and that as a result of that God could tip the scales one way or another in terms of human history, that not the blind forces of history or the marketplace would determine the distribution of resources or the capacity for change, but that a personality was at the heart of history. And so King was comparing those contrasting views of God for his PhD. And then as he was writing and finishing up the degree, he and his wife, Coretta Scott King, determined that they would help the South from which they came, that they would be part of the terrain that had reared them, and that they would return to the South to take up the mantle of leadership. And Dr. King went back to pastor Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. And before he knew it, Rosa Parks was on a bus protesting racial injustice, segregated transportation, and the bus boycott was born, and born from the bus boycott was a tremendous civil rights movement. She was inspired in part by 1955's event where Emmett Till had been extracted from his home in Money, Mississippi, where he was visiting his relatives, taken by white men, two of them, one of whom claimed that his wife was verbally, through a wolf whistle, accosted by Mr. Till, that he, being from the North, didn't know better, that you couldn't, quote, whistle at a white woman. Although, not too many years ago, Miss Carolyn Bryant, the woman at the heart of that story, said that she made most of the stuff up. That most of what you hear about what Emmett Till was charged with, she lied about. And so, my brothers and sisters, that movement sparked the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King Jr. played a central, though by no means exclusive, role. Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker, Robert Moses, Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman, the three civil rights workers who died in Mississippi because they were murdered. And we eventually found out who did it, but of course they were never held to the kind of account immediately that they should have been subject to. And Senator Doug Jones later on, of course, was, before he was a senator, in Alabama and down in the Deep South, trying to make amends, whether we're thinking about Mississippi, whether we're thinking about Georgia, whether we're thinking about Alabama, trying to make amends for some of the crude and cruel misdeeds that were perpetuated in the name of American democracy. And so Dr. King is born in 1929 in the midst of a serious movement for social justice, not one that he planned, but that, according to him, the battering rams of historical necessity thrust me into position. There he was quoting, of course, or should I say, adjusting the quote, adapting the quote, paraphrasing the quote of the great Reinhold Niebuhr, who talked about the battering rams of historical necessity. And Dr. King was suggesting that it was not up to him, but it was the calling of God that got him involved in trying to engage in serious resistance against racial oppression and white supremacy in America. And so all of this as a buildup to say that Martin Luther King Jr. was deeply involved in fighting racial injustice. And yet people have tried to turn Dr. King into a kind of namby-pamby, we are the world, we shall overcome paragon of virtue. And he was far more aggressive in trying to challenge white supremacy, social injustice, economic inequality. Yes, he said, I have a dream. But even in that speech, we don't listen to the full thing. So look at amnesia working there. 50 years ago, he said, that's how he began, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, Dr. King, of course, was speaking about Abraham Lincoln and Lincoln's own striving for immemorial or immortality when it came to rhetoric in America. And that wasn't hard to do, one of the greatest orators we've ever had. And when he said, we shall scarcely remember what happened here today, speaking about Gettysburg, and yet that speech with 200 and some odd words constitutes one of the greatest statements made by not only a president, but by an American orator. And so Dr. King, resembling, or should I say reflecting that particular gesture, starts his I Have a Dream speech 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today, Abraham Lincoln, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. He goes on to say this momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope for millions of Negroes who were manacled in slavery, dealing with the shackles of enslavement. And so Dr. King talked about Black people, and he said, look, we are often marooned on a tiny island of poverty, in that same speech, in that I Have a Dream speech, that you don't hear about most of this stuff because people focus on the latter part and not what was going on earlier. And so marooned on a tiny island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. Dr. King also said, we have come to the nation's capital to cash a check, but we have been told that there are insufficient funds. But he said, we refuse to believe that the great vaults of democracy are empty and that they have insufficient funds. That was a Rihanna moment. Nation better have my money, right? And so Dr. King, in his extraordinary fashion, went on to talk about the fact that the whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundation of this nation until the Negro is granted his full citizenship rights. Black people couldn't vote. Many of them couldn't enjoy public transportation. Many of them couldn't eat at a hamburger counter. Many of them weren't treated with decency and respect. And so Dr. King was making an argument for the fair treatment of Black people. And so many people have forgotten those elements of his speech that were more radical, that challenged the belief that Dr. King was about dreaming and not about doing, about dreaming and not about resisting, about dreaming and not engaging in serious, sustained analysis of and resistance to and fighting against white supremacy in this nation. He was not giving up. He was determined to do the right thing. And so in that speech, he laid that out. And then, of course, Mahalia Jackson, the great singer, is alleged to have said, whether it's an apocryphal story or not, we don't know. But we think that Harriet Tubman said, tell him about the dream, Martin. Because Dr. King was speaking and struggling, not struggling by our standards. Most of us would say he got an A+ as he read his speech. But Dr. King was used to extemporizing. And so she said, tell him about the dream. And then he put the paper away and he said, despite the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream. One day, my 4 little children will live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream. 34 words uttered when he was 34 years old to suggest a race-blind, race-neutral, color-blind preoccupation. But Dr. King was not suggesting that this was that this ideal had come to pass. He was suggesting that it is a noble dream, a noble aspiration, something we're looking forward to. But there are 2 elements of that speech that we often overlook. First, he talked about the marvelous new militancy that has embraced the nation, right? And in one sense, that marvelous new militancy was the Black Lives Matter of its day. So for those who would say, hey, try Dr. King's way, forget the Black Lives Matter way, in many ways, Dr. King is anticipating Black Lives Matter by speaking about CORE or SNCC, Congress of Racial Equality, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and many others. Young people who were organized, who were deeply disciplined, who were trying to leverage their authority as social engineers, as thinkers of the republic, as citizens of democracy, to figure out a way to resist white supremacy, challenge inequality, and go into the very heart of white supremacist expression in Mississippi. And of course, they established Freedom Summer in Mississippi in '64. And so Dr. King showed an appreciation for the Black Lives Matter movement of his day. But there was a second element to that speech that we often overlook. When he talked about, quote, the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. The unspeakable horrors of police brutality. So Black Lives Matter, basically with the students of his day, those who challenged both the regimes of disorder that were inherent in white supremacy, as well as older Black leaders who they felt needed to be challenged in order to grapple with the new reality of younger Black people in this country. And so Dr. King had an appreciation for those, quote, Black Lives Matter protests, or at least protesters, or those I'm arguing were the Black Lives Matter protesters of their day. He didn't diss them. He didn't dismiss them. He wasn't harshly critical of them. He appreciated their good work, but he knew that there was a difference in methodology and approach to what was going on. Both believe in direct action. Both believed on being being on the streets and fighting against social injustice. Both were nonviolent in trying to take up arms, metaphorically, against the sea of troubles that white supremacy had unleashed. And yet, Dr. King's appreciation for them didn't mean that he was uncritical, didn't mean that he didn't have differences. It meant that he was willing to work with them regardless, because he, like they, and they, like he, was committed to the fundamental principle of justice, freedom, and democracy for Black people in this nation. And so there were many more speeches that Dr. King gave. If we want to talk about the amnesia, let's talk about the amnesia we had with Dr. King when he said that, I'm sad to say, but most Americans are unconscious racists. He wasn't trying to point the finger at white brothers and sisters and say, aha, I got you. His point was, we have not yet taken up the deep and profound vocation of trying to resist white supremacy, social injustice, economic inequality, of trying to resist narratives of white superiority, of trying to combat the vicious belief that Black people were inherently inferior. And so, Dr. King was an extraordinary man, and therefore took up the cry and the call for social justice by saying that it is not only a dream that I nurture in my bosom, that the collective enterprise of this nation is to grapple with the failure to live up to that dream. That is true, but there was far more to be grappled with. And so Dr. King said, look, I saw my dream turn into a reality when the 4 little girls were bombed to their heavenly reward not long after that extraordinary event of the March on Washington. He said, later that year, I saw my dream, sadly, tragically, turn into a nightmare. He said, I saw my dream turn into a nightmare when in Watts, California, Los Angeles, I saw those cities combust. And he said, people are asking me to weigh in and to be critical of young people in the inner city when they're not being critical of the militaristic impulses of the American government. So Dr. King was saying, I'm not going to criticize young people for their enthusiasm for a way of resisting white supremacy and not criticize my American government with my fellow white brothers and sisters who continue to perpetuate a legacy of inequality in this country and by pursuing a war in Vietnam. And so Dr. King said that the bombs in Vietnam explode back here at home. They're taking money away from poor Black people and the things we should be doing socially and politically to reconstitute American culture, what LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, not LeBron James, would call the Great Society. And so we have amnesia about Dr. King, about the speech he gave and the more progressive parts of it, about him having more than one speech. And if we're honest, not only about the speech he gave and the different elements that he took up there, right? Police brutality and the militancy that rightfully shook the nation to its core that he applauded. We also got to remember he gave other speeches that were so extraordinary, that were so powerful, that if we reject our citizenship in the United States of amnesia, we can claim citizenship in the kingdom of memory. And in that last speech that Dr. King gave before he died, resting in his motel, the Lorraine Motel, he was tired. It was raining cats and dogs. He was trying to find some relief from the unrelenting pace. When he got into town, he talked about some of the sick white brothers and what they intended to do to him. It was raining cats and dogs. He didn't feel well. He was a man who was not only impeccably dressed, but a man deeply and profoundly committed to his public persona and his image. And unfortunately, the image of Dr. King in those last years is that he was losing some of his mojo, some of his juice, and that students weren't turning out the same way, that adults weren't turning out the same way, that he couldn't draw the same kind of audience as he had before. And so, my brothers and sisters, as I end the great speech that Dr. King gave the night before he was murdered. All we ask, America, is be true to what you said on paper. Be true to what you said on paper, America. We don't want to remember this Martin Luther King Jr., who said that most Americans were unconscious racists, who talked about white supremacy as the predicate and premise for so much of the politics of America. The Martin Luther King Jr., who was able to call out American complicity in Vietnam and how wrong and destructive that was for our history. That's part of King too, the amnesia that blocks him. The amnesia that blocks the fact that many people wanted to kill him. If they loved him so much, why is he dead? It doesn't mean that white brothers and sisters and others didn't admire Dr. King. It meant that there were a bunch of people who hated him, who didn't love him, who didn't support him, and who were outraged by his commitment to tell and do the truth. And so here is a man who said the night before he was murdered, America, all we ask is be true to what you said on paper. Move it from parchment to pavement. Move it from ideals to realities. Move it from the sunlight of public exposure, right? Or move it to there from the darkness of private expressions of both support and animus. The point is, my brothers and sisters, Dr. King was saying, America, pony up. America, do the right thing. America, raise your voice and vision and be honest and true about the limitations imposed upon Black people in this nation, about the refusal to acknowledge our humanity. And so he said, America, be true to what you said on paper, the noble ideals, the marvelous aspirations, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, the great texts written about us, to us, for us as a nation, to grapple with the social injustices that prevail. And all we ask, America, be true to what you said on paper. If you said you believed in justice, practice it. If you said you believe in democracy, practice it. If you said you believed in freedom, practice it. Because Martin Luther King Jr. gave his life struggling to make certain that America could be the best that it should be. That the nation had to reflect the ideals upon which it rested. That the nation was willing to invest at least as much energy in upholding the power and beauty of American ideals within Black communities, that we had the strength to contribute to that, to make America the best that it can be. And so be true to what you said on paper. T.S. Eliot, the great poet, said, between the ideal and the reality falls the shadow. And so light the shadow with the light of a life well lived, of a commitment to racial justice, of a commitment to racial equality, of a commitment to making certain that all peoples, women, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and IA, that every element of our community, whether we agree or not, deserves to be supported. And as Martin Luther King Jr. said at the end of his life, deserves to know that we have moved from parchment to pavement, from ideal to reality, from talk to walk, to make America all that it should be. And so as I end, America is a great nation, but not because of its internal or inherent majesty alone, but because of the hard work we should be able and willing to do to make America a greater place, to make certain that in many ways we continue to move forward to become the best that we can become. God bless you.
Let us all give a virtual round of applause to Brother Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. You can use your reactions to do so. I just want to say thank you on behalf of NC3 for giving such a beautiful, rich, dynamic lecture to us. Many of you know, my name is Sean Palmer, and I serve as the director of the Upper Mid-African American Cultural Center here at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, where we are at the top of the Gullah Geechee corridor. I would like to thank my colleagues for organizing this, and I will be serving as the question and answer quasi-moderator. You can feel free to send me questions directly, but if you send them to the Office for Equity and Diversity at ECU, they will then send those to me. Brother Dyson, I have a number of questions that range from the beautiful prose that you have put on paper, maybe also from my way of being a fan of your work for almost 30 years, and also from the audience. And so I will privilege the audience's questions. And I think one question that is asked that maybe by like a really good, easy question to think through is a question about the legacy of the civil rights activists and activism and the Black church. The question goes something like this: could you explain the relationship of the Black church and the civil rights movement, and why is it that the church seems to be demonized in the present day, maybe as a part of BLM, or really just kind of a part of kind of American culture, and when so many great folk have come through the Black church or come out of the Black church. What are your thoughts about that, Brother Dyson?
Yes, sir. Well, thank you for your kind words and your support over the years. Look, the Black church has been central to the civil rights movement. The Black church has been central to the Black freedom struggle. The church has been central to any design or desire of Black people to overcome the inequalities that exist and to design a blueprint of change and transformation. So it's been there from the get-go. Now, the late theologian Robert McAfee Brown is right. He said the church is like the Noah's Ark. If it wasn't for the storm on the outside, you couldn't stand the stink on the inside. So while there has been a storm outside, there's been some stink on the inside.
True.
And so there have been limitations. There's been homophobia, there's been transphobia, there's been sexism that the Black church shares with most other religious organizations, by the way, right? It's not endemic to the Black church or exclusive to them. But what is interesting, of course, is that when you are seen as a leader and progressive in so many other ways, it hurts when you're not leading in all ways. So that, if you're speaking out against racism, it seems like you want to speak out against sexism and misogyny and patriarchy and homophobia too. Now, elements of the Black church do that. But we know y'all in the Bible Belt, heck, y'all on the buckle of the Bible Belt. Y'all know what it is. You know the conservative values. You know the belief that some people have about their church and God and their Bible and what the Bible said, the word says. Now, these are the same people that have had the word used against them for a variety of things, now trying to justify women speaking down on the platform. Don't come up on the church. Oh my God, don't come on the pulpit. Because women don't belong there. Are you saying that they don't? What are you saying? Are you saying that women don't belong on the floor? They belong in the pulpit? How could you go against the theology? Bruh, that's your way. That's some man-made. Literally, when I mean man, I'm talking about man. Ain't no women said that. Right? Now, women internalize that. Some women, patriarchy's most effective advocates sometimes wear skirts. And if we're going to be in a moment of speaking against trans, because men can wear skirts too, or other on all genders can, patriarchy in flesh that is not masculine, right? And that asserts itself as a ventriloquist effect.
Mhm.
So now some Black Lives Matter people, you know, because they figured the church done had its run, get out the way, Reverend Doctor, Professor. We ain't going nowhere. We's up in here. We's in the spot. we trying to, you know, because many churches are doing progressive things, insightful things, with White Rock up in, you know, Durham, or
Sure.
you
Mhm.
know, Reverend Freddie Haynes up in Dallas, or
Sure.
Gina Stewart in Memphis. A lot of progressive Black churches doing some righteous stuff and can hoop and holler and can preach. Don't be mad at charisma. Yes, we don't want to have charismatic authoritarianism where Black male leadership is condescending toward others and hierarchically established so that people on the bottom can't get no word in edgewise. So that's why, you know, Ella Baker said, look, I'm going to leave y'all with that. I'm going to go on over here with Snick and John Lewis and Diane Nash and so on and so forth. But John Lewis was a preacher too. And the hierarchy of the Black church has sometimes been discouraging of the acceptance of a broad variety of liberation and emancipatory ethics. So we got to acknowledge that. So it's flawed. But
Right.
as the late preacher William Augustus Jones used to say, when people said there's so many hypocrites in the church, he said, come on and join us. There's always room for one more. So but the thing is that we've got to be able to separate our love for the Black church and appreciation for what it has done historically and
Mhm.
admit at the same time it ain't been perfect. And we got to acknowledge that. Like, let me give one example and I'll be quiet. So I was in Cleveland. Dang, I didn't mean to say I was in Cleveland, but okay, I was in Cleveland. Dang, I done already
You
told
can
you.
say Columbus. We can change it up.
But I want to lie. I'm in Cleveland, Ohio, preaching at a Black church, and the Black woman said, "You know you're going to hell." This is after the sermon. I was like, "Well, dang,
Wow.
did Jesus tell you that already? Because man, I talked to him this morning, and he ain't told me I was going to be in flames. What's up with that?" Right? I said, "Well, hell, I guess I don't have to watch my cholesterol now. Let me go on. All right, whatever." And I said, "But why are you saying I'm going?" "You know why I said you going to hell." I said, "No." She said, "Because you had the nerve to preach today that God made gay people." I said, "But you think I'm going to hell? And you a polytheist? Because you think there's a God for straight people and one for gay? What kind of theology is that?" I said, "Now here's the thing that trips me out. Are you saying God didn't make gay people? So God took a day off on that day. God said, look, I'm taking Thursday off. That's when all the gay people got in. That's when all the gay people got made and the women. Because some people think women are jacked up too, right?
Right.
So the people who you don't like got made on Thursday. Well, but God had a lot, but I thought God was God all the time. Even when God wasn't God, God was God. Because no such thing as God not being God. So what are you talking about, right? Well, are you trying to say God made somebody gay? I said, a gay person can't no more get up and be straight tomorrow than you can get up and be gay. And if you can, I've helped you out. So don't be mad. If I didn't help you discover something about yourself you did not know. And why is it we get obsessed with the gay thing? I said, what are you scared of being gay? Or you think you gay yourself? And how do you know it's not a choice? I'll tell you how I know. That white senator from Iowa who was pro-life, wife and several kids, and tiptoed into the bathroom and knocked on the foot of his neighbor in the next stall to signify that he was open for business. Now, I've done the same thing, but I was just looking for some toilet paper. I had no idea that was the hookup sign. I was like, yo, no, oh, hey, thanks a lot. No, I appreciate it, but I just want some toilet paper, bro. That's it. So my point is that we have to be far more open-minded and willing to understand God as God and let God do God's business without us trying to send people to hell that we don't know nothing about.
I agree. I absolutely agree with that, Brother Dyson. I want to move the conversation to your text around Jay-Z Made in America. And you put up in the end of your book, you do a beautiful job of connecting Jay-Z to King. And really, it was part of like what I hear you saying in the text, in the body, as you describe the kind of the sadness, the overwhelmed depression that you saw King having in those later years. And I wonder if you could wax eloquently about what you see as King's legacy in hip hop and the fragility of kind of just Black masculinity, if you will.
Wow. And then the follow-up question will be, that dude, you didn't ask me a booking too right there, bro.
I read your book, so I like your question. So I was like, because really what I want to talk about is you notice you talk about King's sexuality, which many Black authors are either they want to turn it into some kind of gossip,
right,
or they want to turn it, they don't want to see it in the body of the fullness of who he is.
right.
And I feel like you rescue him when you were talking about Jay-Z in 444, which
right.
I think is I thought it was a very profound way to describe King as a human.
Yeah. No, well, thank you for that. And when they open up those tapes in 2027, all y'all pissed at me, you gonna calm down, dog. All the people mad at me, all the Black people, I can't believe you would do that and talk about that. Oh, that ain't nothing compared to what they gonna be talking about when them tapes is opened up in 2027. Remember, they were locked for 50 years? And remember when Ronald Reagan, well, we'll know in 50 years, we'll, there you go again. And he was talking about communism, though. He wasn't even talking about the personal stuff. Now, first of all, they shouldn't have been taping Dr. King in the hotel and all that's his business. Imagine if somebody was taping you doing your thing.
Mm-hmm.
The thought alone just scared the hell out of you right there. I can see your, oh my God. Oh my God. I'm known as a button down, appropriate, and then when we get to real tapes, come on, daddy. Right there. I'm gonna leave it right there. I'm gonna leave it right there. I ain't saying nothing else. I ain't saying nothing else. So the thing is, imagine if somebody had some darn tape on your business.
Come on.
And what you were doing. They shouldn't have been doing that. Bobby Kennedy, by the way, allowed the wiretap. The white liberal attorney general allowed J. Edgar Hoover to start the tape on King, ostensibly to look for, evidence of communism. But they were tiptoeing all over his bedroom, trying to figure out what he was doing. Even psychosexual jealousy of Black men is a thing. It's been a thing, right? And so the truth of the matter is that Dr. King was a human being. He had sins, he had faults, he has flaws, and we should accept them. And we shouldn't have to demand that somebody be perfect to be useful. Man, if this was Wednesday night, I'd say,
You got one. I said,
Sister Cole, Sister Hazel Cole, pass that hat. Oh, Lord. Anyway, so the thing is that you ain't got to be perfect. And these young people with this cancel culture, I'm going to cancel you because I disagree with you. You're a white man who used blackface 20 years ago. I want to stop you from being governor. Stop. I'm not saying it wasn't right. I'm not saying wearing blackface was right. But are you telling me that if that governor can stay in like he did in Ralph Northam in Virginia, when they called me up, they said, Dyson, what should we do? I said, leave the white man in. Why? Because ain't nothing better than a white man who's conscious of the fact that Black people done forgave him. And now he gonna be better than ever. Come on, man. You know how it is when your husband forgive you, when your wife forgive you. Baby, I'm gonna show you I'm better than ever. Man, I'm being too personal up in here. Y'all killing me today. Y'all making me confess stuff ain't nobody writing my book. Stop. But the thing is, somebody will forgive you into a better picture of yourself.
You actually talk about that. You said on page 191 to forgive our way into freedom. Like you mentioned that in the book. And I do have like 3 or 4 questions about how white colleagues can either be in solidarity or white students can be in solidarity. And what is the appropriate line?
Right.
When what's the line between taking over and participating in, I guess, paternalism,
right?
And the line between actually being an advocate,
right?
And then So that's one student's question. And I guess you could hear from the administrative side as well. How do we take white words on paper and turn them into action? And which is really kind of a question about white liberals writing things like Black Lives Matter, but like creating policies that don't actually align with that.
Yeah, no, that's you, man. You breaking it down. Look, we want, allies. We want allies to be in cahoots with us, right? Accomplices with us, as they say, in complicity with us. And the thing about allies is you got to face all the lies. Get it? Allies, all lies. You got to work with me here, people. I mean, it's late. I'm trying to do the best I can. Please, thank you. Please and thanks. So allies, all lies. I just came up with that. I'm gonna write that down. Don't be trying to steal it. I'm taking it. Let me see. Hold on. All lies, allies. That's good. That's good, man. So the thing is that when you're an ally, there are many. There's as the great philosopher Meek Mill said. There's levels to this ish. There are levels to this. You got the first level of allyship. Hey, I'm gonna read some books. I'm gonna check it out. I'm gonna fight the battle. All right, cool. Second level is I'm gonna read the books, fight the battle, and I'm gonna join with some other Black and brown and red and yellow people and indigenous people and native people to figure out what we're gonna do at the crib, right? The crib could be my particular arena of engagement. Sorry for that vernacular slip into a bonacised articulation.
We like that. That's fine down here in the Gullah South.
At the crib, at the crizzy, brizzy, nizzy, you hizzard, holla. Anyway, so the thing is, at the crib, where you are, when you go home to your mama, how can you be a better white ally to us? By talking to white folk in ways we can never reach. We ain't gonna never be able to reach white folk. I don't care how funny I am. Okay, I'm trying out for a Def Comedy Jam, but that was 20 years ago. That's how late I am. But I don't care how funny I am or how cute three people might think I am. Okay, mama, thanks a lot for that. And how smart some other people might think I am. Some white folk ain't gonna never hear me because they don't like niggas. That's just what it is, right? But they your mama. Now, I understand you loving your mama who thinks I'm a nigga. I get it. The question is, you can't God loves you just the way you are, but God loves you too much to leave you that way. Ha! Hallelujah. Shout hallelujah. Lord Jesus, man, I'm a preacher of that. Come on, Sister Cole. Help me out over here. Sister Patterson, where you at? Let's go. So the thing is that when we look at the fact that white folk can become deputized by allies like Black folk I'm gonna deputize you right tonight. Raise your hand. I, white person, will promise to, right? Infiltrate like a Trojan horse the dominions of whiteness, and then when I'm in there, let Malcolm X out, Angela Davis out, let John Brown out, let Nat Turner out, let Ivy Moraine out, let Eric Marlin out. All right, he's already there, but he's still a good dude. All right, I like Eric Marlin. That's my dude. So the thing is that how do we find a way to transport the considerable cachet and resources of anti-racist thinking into the spots where they need to operate in ways they ain't gonna hear no Negro mouth? Your white mouth becomes the vehicle to articulate them. But you got to know enough so on the spot when they ask you some questions, you can give answer. Don't be just, let me read the autobiography of Angela. Hold on for a second. No, you already ready. You step up into the spot, ready to go. When the rim is in the system, ain't no telling, will I love them, will I diss them? That's what they be yelling up by blood, not relation. Y'all still chase some, I'll replay some. Huh? What? Look at the two deaconesses rolling with me. I love this. So the thing is that you have to be a better ally in that way because you're deeply and profoundly knowledgeable. And then you're willing, like a Trojan horse, to go inside as a gift and using your whiteness, your white privilege, to gain access to spaces and places that other people will not, and use them to dethrone the imperial presence of white supremacy. So in that sense, we began to argue against those things that are destructive and that are racist and that are problematic or homophobic or classist or misogynist, and began to challenge them. Did I don't even know if I began to answer your question. I got off on there, man.
I think you did. I think you answered lots of pieces of that question about which we hear in Black communities saying often, like, we will never sit at your auntie's table.
Right.
So you have to address your auntie's racism rather than sitting in my face affirming how you feel so that we're sitting in a chorus of hosannas. I would love to push on. We have two questions that are kind of connected.
Okay.
The thought is one question is, how do you understand the Capitol incident? And I would say, let me attach that question to how you see the economic downturn and class consciousness for what people of color, but specifically Black folk in America.
What's the last part? How do I see the downturn?
How do you see the economic downturn in class consciousness, specifically of kind of like white folk, right, and their understanding, these kinds of understandings of the Capitol incident? And maybe forwarding that question, would you see them showing up on campuses? Do you see this as a campus community question, a concern, or do you see this as like, do we need to go back and think through the context as a whole university, or what are your ways of getting at these two realities that students are kind of currently finding themselves in?
The Capitol stuff and the class consciousness stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, let me turn to some of my other deacons here. Brother Bruce Dick, I see you out there, Bruce. What up? Bruce, you're anyway, what a great guy. So the thing is, and Brother Kalam, what's up? Y'all side by side, y'all neighbors on the Brady Bunch. So y'all should just reach out and say hello to each other. But the thing is this, is that now we all know what's going on at the Capitol. Come on now. You ain't got to be smoking no dope. Get off the pipe. You understand that if that had been some Black people rolling up in that Capitol, they would have been dead. I mean, even Greg Chadwick knows that. He understands that white brothers and sisters rolling up in the Capitol, the irony is, in the name of American patriotism, when they were subverting the very democratic process, small d, not big D, democratic process, when they were certifying and validating the Electoral College, which is outdated, outmoded. We need to get rid of that ish immediately, but that's what it is right now. Certifying the votes from the states, the most precious ritual of American franchise at a particular moment when we certify the ballot, because that means it is the precious belief and the registered opinion of millions of American voters. And you trying to undercut that in the name of your sense of patriotism. You are not a patriot, you're an anti-patriot. You don't love America, you're an anti-American. You're dragging the Confederate flag. Last time I checked, let's take a moment for Nipsey Hussle. Last time that I checked, man, I'm dropping it on y'all. I don't even know. I think I'm gonna have to go back and charge extra. I think I'm gonna have to go back and charge extra, because this is getting gooder. So the thing is, as my man said, last time that I checked, come on, Rebecca Hart, help me out down there. The last time that I checked, that this is the sign and the banner of disloyal human beings to America, that the Confederate flag was the flag of those who seceded. That ain't no a lispy way, right? I don't hate no lisp, secede, like I'm saying they succeeded. That ain't what I'm saying. The secession was the deliberate disengagement with the nation because you couldn't get your way. States' rights to what? Own slaves. States' rights to own enslaved human beings, right? And so my point is that we know that the capital offense, get it? Capital offense, what? See what I'm playing with the language there? See, I'm just trying to play with it now. Come on there. Thank you, Ms. Patterson. I appreciate you. Dr. Betty Glenn, you got to step up your amens. So the thing is that, yes, Kristen Howe down there. I see you, Kristen. Kristen, you look, there's that smile. I knew Kristen could smile at me. So the thing is is that the capital offense existed in a culture where whiteness was seen as normalized, and therefore they weren't perceived as what they were: terrorists, subverting American democracy. And do you know how many of those people were part of what? American military? Now the American military and the law enforcement against the very ideals of government, and Negroes get shot for going around their car just to get in and get paralyzed for life.
Well,
What looked like a gun, right? What looked like, a knife, and get shot 5 times in the back. But white brothers and sisters, for the most part, not even stopped, assaulted, retarded, kept back, repulsed, rejected. And as a result of that, they were able to get inside. And God bless the young woman who lost her life. I disagree with her politics, but don't believe that anybody should have been hurt. But the point is that Black people get hurt every day. Brown people get hurt every day for no good reason. George Floyd on the ground for a miggy, friggy $20 bill that the owner of the store said he probably didn't even realize was counterfeit. And he dies for that. Elijah McClain in Colorado dies because he has a mask on, because he's cold. He's 23 years old, on the spectrum, a sweet soul, and they crush him to death and render him unconscious twice. Breonna Taylor shot in her home. Sandra Bland accosted for no good reason. 2 days later found hung in her cell. Hadia Pendleton shot by a young Black man, and 2 of whom are serving life in prison. So it ain't just one way. And then, of course, Eric Garner, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, right? Walter, down in South Carolina, Brother Walter, where he was down there and he was running from the police because he was afraid they stopped him because he owed child support, and they shot him 7 times in the back. Philando Castile in Minnesota, right? So all of this, which is to say that the capital offense was the most powerful and evident and visible manifestation of white privilege and white supremacy at the same time. And the refusal to acknowledge the legitimacy of Black life in the midst of a struggle over the meaning of democracy. And a lot of those white folk who were pissed at other white folk, now they want to hang Mike Pence, is because he wasn't using his position as a white person to keep the Negroes in place. Man, I'm breaking it down for you. Brother Howe, that's what I'm saying. Just hear me out. So the thing is that you're not operating sufficiently to keep the Black menace in place. So we pissed at you. But that's Trump's boy. But yeah, he could have turned the whole thing up. So now the idiosyncratic, narcissistic, pathologically myopic, and friggin' mendacious, just lying. I'm just trying to use a bunch of big words not to call him a mother. But so what I'm saying is that it is, Deidre, thank you, Deidre, help me out now. So the thing is that what we have to understand is that white supremacy operates in bold fashion within American culture, but it doesn't get called that because it's seen as the normal response of upset citizens about the imposed limits on their democracy. Now, in terms of class consciousness, you would think that the white folk would have more in common with us than they would have with the rich white people out there, right? The rich white people out there ain't got no love for you. Now, I see Whitney Wilson at ECU, even though she got a, she ain't got a real picture. She got her avatar on there. But you hear me, Sister Wilson? My God, the point is Dr. King was in jail one day in Birmingham, and the jailers came to him. M.E. Hayes, do you hear me, M.E. Hayes? I see you out there, M.E. Hayes. Ebony Bow, Julie Strauss. I'm just calling them members of my congregation. Lorena Cavillo. Come on, Sherry Shaw. Just help me out. So I'm saying, Brandy Hanant Crawford, I'm not messing up your name, but the thing is that here we are out there understanding that Dr. King is in jail, and he said, they said to him as jailers, you know, Dr. King, segregation is right and integration is wrong. He said, no, it's not. They went back and forth. And finally, Dr. King said, he asked the person, Letitia Hensley, do you hear me? Brother Alan Bailey, Cherie Speller, he said, how much money do you make? And will you believe Laurie Ramirez when he told Dr. King how much money he made, Miss Kim Winter? Do you know Dr. King said, well, hell, you need to be out here marching with us because you not making nothing. You making the same thing. And the white overlords and the imperial determinists, the imperial dragons of your white existence are exploiting you just like they're exploiting us. You ain't making no money, but they're paying you in what Dr. Du Bois in 1935 called the wages of whiteness. At least you ain't a Negro. So now they make you feel good that you're not black, but they're still screwing you economically at the same time. If we were to ask many of these Trump voters, this a billionaire? That's who you got? That's who understands you? A billionaire. Now, he probably ain't no billionaire. He faking, but he got a bunch of money nonetheless. You know what I'm saying? I have billions, billions, billions. But he ain't got no billions. But all right. Thing is, that's who you choose? That's your dude? Right? A billionaire who has no awareness of what your back means to be against the wall, the lethal limits imposed upon you, not being able to support yourself, don't even want to give you the full range of a check, held up the check for $2,000 for so long on the COVID check. So there should be ostensibly, supposedly, theoretically, deep and profound solidarity established between poor and working class white people and poor and working class people of color, BIPOC, across the board. So finally, then, Black people too have lost some of that social and that class consciousness, right? That's why police brutality, we thought back when Al Sharpton was doing it, Big Al, you know, it's like Little Luther, Big Luther, Big Al Sharpton, Small Al Sharpton. I'm dropping it on you, son. And Al Sharpton's my man. I'm talking about, I love him. So I'm not saying this in a disrespectful fashion. I'm saying when Al Sharpton was out there with the running suits and Negroes thought, oh, that's them, the Negroes who get into trouble and they need somebody like Sharpton to come help them with the police. Oh, lo and behold, oh, it's messing with middle-class Negroes too. Oh my God, it's messing with upper middle-class Negroes too. My Jiminy Cricket, what's going on? My God. Yeah, everybody in the club getting tipsy. Or at least getting arrested. Lord Jesus, you know I'm spitting that knowledge. So the thing is that now we have to understand we are all tied together. And the sooner we do that, the better we'll be able to be as American citizens together.